We explained in the previous classes in this series that where two people have a verbal agreement to sell, one to sell and the other to buy, that for one of those two parties to go back on the deal, even though there's been no actual contractual act, is immoral. The person who does so is considered as a mechusrei amana, as an unreliable person that people shouldn't do business with in the future. Today I want to talk to you about the situation where there's a third party who he wants to get involved in the negotiations. He wants to buy something for himself where two other people are already closing a deal between them over this same object. Once the deal has already been closed and there's been a contractual act, so then there's no question. It's certainly no one else can get in. The property is already owned by the original buyer. I'm talking about before we get to that stage, before there's been a contractual act, where there's just a verbal agreement. If a third party decides that he wants to get involved and buy for himself, is that considered immoral? Is he a thief? Or is it okay? Let's take the example of two people that are selling a car that we spoke about in the previous shiurim. The seller wants 50,000 for his car, and the buyer has agreed to pay 50,000, and he's going to come tomorrow with the money. A third party knows this, and he now wants to get involved and come to the buyer and pay him the money and take the car before the first buyer can come back. Is he doing something immoral or not? The Gemara in Masechet Kedushin tells us a story like this, from which we're going to be able to learn how to deal with such a situation. There was a rabbi called Rav Gidel who was interested in buying or acquiring a particular piece of land. And he was looking around and checking it out and seeing if it was the right thing for him, if it was what he needed. Before he could decide, before he could actually buy it for himself, Rabbi Abba came along and he bought it. Rav Gidel was very upset. He sent people to speak to Rabbi Abba and ask him what he'd done and why did he do such a thing. They asked Rabbi Abba the question, what happens if someone is about to buy something and someone else comes and buys it before them? Answered Rabbi Abba, that person is considered as having done something very immoral. Ad kedei kach, that he's considered as an evil person, as a rosha, for doing such a thing. For buying something before someone else, he's considered as a rasha. So then they asked Rabbi Abba the begging question, so if so, why did you do that? You bought that piece of land that Rav Gidel was looking to buy for himself. Said Rabbi Abba, I didn't know. I didn't realize that Rav Gidel was interested in buying it. So they said, well, what about now? Now you do know that he wanted it. What are you going to do now? He said, okay, so now I'm going to give him that piece of land. You're going to give him the land. He has to pay you for the land. Says Rabbi Abba, no, I don't want him to pay me for the land. You're right. The halacha is certainly that he has to pay me, and I'll give him the land. But there's what's called a segula, that you shouldn't sell the first piece of land that you ever acquire. This piece of land is the first land that I've ever acquired. I'm not interested in selling it, but I'm also not interested in keeping it, because I know that Rav Gidel wanted it for himself, and it's not right for me to take that land that he wanted. So therefore I'm prepared to give it to him. So they went to Rav Gidel. Rav Gidel, you're going to get this land for free. Rav Gidel said, listen, it's very nice you want to give it to me for free, but I don't accept gifts. I am a person, sone matanot yichye. I don't like receiving gifts. I want to, everything I have, I've earned it with my own efforts. And that's the way I want to keep things. So I'm prepared and very happy to pay Rabbi Abba to get the land, but I don't want it for free. So now we had a bit of a broch. Rav Gidel is not prepared to pay for the land. Rav Abba doesn't want the land because Rav Gidel wanted it first. And he's not prepared to sell it because it's not considered a good thing to sell the first piece of land that you ever buy. Says the Gemara, the land remained hefker, it remained ownerless, and it was called Ara D'Rabbanan. It was called by everyone the piece of land that the rabbis were arguing about. Zat Hashem, that we should only have arguments like that. But what do we see from here? We see that even though even though Rabbi Abba didn't know that Rav Gidel was interested in buying the piece of land when he bought it, nevertheless, it's considered immoral for him to keep that land, and he should give it to Rav Gidel and let him have the land for its price, right? The fact they wanted to give it as a gift, as we said, that was lifnim meshurat din. He wasn't necessarily obligated to do that. So from here we see that where someone is about to buy something, even though they haven't yet bought it, it's immoral for someone else to come in and buy it before them. But nevertheless, there's something more we have to understand in this case. One of the great Rishonim, the Baalei HaTosfos, Rabbeinu Tam, he says that this case of Rav Gidel is the halacha, but there's an exception. There's a condition here. Where the property or that was about to be bought is something that the buyer cannot find somewhere else, where it's a find, where it's either been given away for free, or it's being sold even for half price, or it's the type of property that you wouldn't find anywhere else. It's the house on the corner that's opposite the supermarket and right next to the school, and it's a house you wouldn't find anywhere else with the perfect view. There's no other house like that. Where the property in question is a find that you won't find anywhere else, then you can't say to the second buyer, why are you coming to buy this piece of property that I'm interested in? Go and find something like this somewhere else. There's plenty of houses for sale. There's plenty of Toyotas for sale. Go and buy another one. Why are you going to come and buy the one that I was about to buy? You can't say that where the property in question is something unique, something that you wouldn't find anywhere else, says Rabbeinu Tam. And therefore, says Rabbeinu Tam, that this halacha is the halacha, but only in a case where the second buyer could find similar property in another place for the same price. If it's a find, if it's something that's been given away very, very cheaply at half price, then this halacha doesn't apply. The second buyer that comes along and takes it before the first, of course, as I said at the beginning, only in a case where the first buyer hasn't yet bought it, where he's just interested in buying it. In any such case, the second guy is not considered as having done something immoral by buying before the first person. That's the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. There's another opinion, though, which we have to talk about, and that's the opinion of Rashi. Rashi says that here we are talking even about a find, even about something that the second buyer will not find anywhere else. Even so, to buy it before the first guy, he's considered as a rasha. He's considered as having done something very, very immoral, and he shouldn't do it, even though, according to everyone, even though you've done something immoral here, Beis Din can't get involved. Beis Din can't make you give it back. It's right for you to give it back. It's morally right and ethically right for you to give it back, but you can't be obligated to give it back. The second guy that comes along and buys, he is the actual owner. He is the legal owner of the property, even though he has done something that's immoral. This argument between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam comes through to the halacha. The Shulchan Aruch brings both opinions. The Ramor says that the halacha is like Rabbeinu Tam. The halacha in this decision is like Rabbeinu Tam, that where the property in question is something unique, the second buyer is not considered as having acted immorally by buying it before the first person. The Ramor adds on that this halacha also only applies where the first buyer has already closed the deal completely with the seller, where there are no more details of the sale to be discussed. They've agreed on a price, and they've agreed on all the details around the sale, all the conditions of sale that are going to be. Where they haven't done that, where, for example, the buyer says, let me go home and sleep on it, and I'll give you an answer tomorrow morning. So there, the deal hasn't been closed between them. Where the deal hasn't been closed, or Another example of where it hasn't been closed would be where the seller has said his final price and the buyer wants to think about it before he gives him a final answer. Right? In any situation where they haven't yet finalized all the details, so the Ramah says that the deal is still considered as open, and even where it's not unique property, someone else can come in and buy before the first buyer. But it's interesting that there's a very, very important tshuva of Moshe Feinstein. He speaks about a case very similar to this case. The case that came in front of Moshe Feinstein was a case like this. There was a parent who was looking for someone to teach his son during the summer holidays. And he was having negotiations with a particular teacher. And the negotiations had got to the stage where the teacher thought that he's waiting now for a final answer from the parent. And the parent thought that he's waiting now for a final answer from the teacher. And each of them went home, and they're both sitting and waiting for a phone call from the other side. But they haven't actually finalized anything. But they've come to the end of their negotiations. And each one thinks that he's waiting for a final answer from the other side. In the meantime, the parent is at home, and he's waiting to hear from the teacher. He's not hearing from him, so he picks up the phone to another teacher. And he offered him the job, and the two of them managed to close the deal very quickly over the phone. And he employed him. The first teacher found out about this, and they came to the rabbi. What are we going to do? You have taken, he said, the teacher's claiming from the second teacher, you have taken away the job that I was about to get. I'm in the middle of negotiations to get that job, and you have come and taken it away. You have to give it back to me. You have to resign. You can't take it. You have to leave it for me. So it would seem that according to the strict halakha, seeing as the first two have not yet closed their deal, even though they're in the middle of negotiations, seeing as they haven't actually closed their deal, a third party would be allowed to get involved. The second teacher wouldn't be considered as having acted immorally by taking the job for himself, even though he didn't know, the second teacher didn't know that the first teacher was in negotiations. But from the story of Rav Gidel and Rabbi Abba, we see that it doesn't make any difference whether you know or whether you don't know. Once you do know, it's immoral for you to keep it for yourself, to keep the property yourself, and you should be giving it over to the first buyer. So what happens in this case? It would seem that the second teacher can take the job for himself. But Rav Moshe Feinstein said no, and he brings a proof from the Sma. We won't go into the proof in the source material. But he brings a proof that while the two are still in negotiations, even though they haven't yet finalized the deal, nevertheless, it's still considered immoral for someone else to get involved. This psak has tremendous ramifications for much of the business that we do today, not necessarily just between businessmen, between laymen as well. When you're buying a house and someone else is in negotiations for buying that house, even though they haven't finalized the negotiations, according to this psak of Moshe Feinstein, it's not moral for someone else to get involved and ruin their negotiations and buy it for themselves. Where the second buyer is offering a higher price, then that's different. Where he's offering a higher price, it's mashma from the poskim that he's not considered as a rosha for getting involved and buying it for himself. And as we said, this even applies, according to Rabbeinu Tam, that's the actual halacha, where it's something that you could get somewhere else. Nevertheless, it's not considered right where the first two are still involved in negotiations for someone else to get involved and buy it for themselves. Thank you.